We are discussing Robinson's interview. This is part two of the interview that was conducted by Konstantin and Francis Foster at Triggernometry. And I was telling you that how Tommy Robinson forgot to talk about the type of support that the Western world extended to the fanatical elements in Afghanistan and jihadists all over the world. And I told you about Iran, about Indonesia, about Afghanistan, and other countries and Egypt, where these jihadis were supported. And later on, I also told you about Syria and Chechens, separatists, and Islamists in China, saying that if Islamists rise against the Chinese government, then by whom would it be supported? So it was not only these countries. If you look at the crisis in Bosnia, so their Islamic extremists were also supported by the Western world, and again the target was Milosevic. So when you talk about, and then one of the most brutal dictators in the history of Pakistan, which was considered or declared or accused of supporting Islamic terrorists later on, was General Zia, and he enjoyed the support of both Donald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher, again the Western world, and he wanted to export Islamic ideology and Islamic jihad to Central Asian states and to other. And again, who supported him? The Western world. So that was there. And during the time of Bosnian crisis in 90s, again Muslim youth were encouraged to take part in that jihad. And one of the guys who got radicalized because of Bosnian issues, because of crisis in Bosnia, and because of the encouragement of the Western world, or alleged encouragement of Western world to fight Milosevic, was Omar Sheikh, Omar Sheikh, who later on abducted an American journalist, and he was sentenced by Pakistani court and Pakistani lower courts. He was sentenced by Pakistani lower court. He was accused of, or rather, he was convicted of abducting Daniel Pearl, Wall Street Journal, and later on killing him. So this was the result, that the West supported these militants, these Islamic terrorists, who not only created problem for Western world, but they destroyed Muslim world. And even in Libya, it is alleged that the West threw support behind fanatical elements or Islamists who were fighting Colonel Gaddafi. And again, for them, Gaddafi was the matter. So no matter who is opposing Gaddafi, he's or she is the friend of the Western world. They supported. And what is the situation now? Uh, Libya, which used to have one of the highest human development index in Africa, it has plunged sort of in civil war, and it is the center of human smuggling. Many might share the concern of Tommy Robinson about immigration, and which, I mean, there could be legitimate concern, but important point is that we need to find out the underlying causes. For instance, how many Syrians were there in Germany, in the UK, and other parts of Europe before 2011? But because of the Western policy of turning a blind eye towards the fanatical elements who were fighting Bashar al Assad, the country was pushed towards a civil war, rendering more than 11 million people homeless. Syria suffered great devastation because of this jihadist fight, and it suffered a loss of more than $150 billion. So imagine 11 million people were rendered homeless internally, and many of them had to flee. Why? Because of the terrorism of the jihadis, whose activities were ignored by the Western world. And some of these jihadis then, of course, committed atrocities in Western world as well. In the same way, Afghanistan war in 1970s, it also created crisis. And when the Western government toppled Taliban regime in Afghanistan, they had to recruit many local Afghans. They created National Afghan Army, the US and NATO. And after they welcomed Taliban, in 2019, after they brought them power in one way or another way, these people of the National Afghan Army who ran into hundreds and thousands, they had to flee the country. They supported the Western government. So again, it was the Western government, and many Afghans had to flee. Now, the Taliban, who are still being supported by the United States in one way or another way, and even Donald Trump, the icon of Tommy Robinson, has not stopped that support. Taliban have shut down a number of educational institutions for women. Women cannot work, they cannot go outside, they cannot run their businesses. There are severe restrictions, or many women cannot go outside unaccompanied. And again, who is supporting them? Donald Trump, the icon of the far right, the icon of all conservative. So, if millions of women are unable to get education, if they can be killed for merely going outside, if they can be killed for merely trying to get education, where would they go? So that's the problem. They will run. And those Afghan soldiers who supported NATO, of course, they have families and extended families. It's not only they who are in danger, but their families are also in danger. So these are the root causes. War and civil war is the single most important cause for immigration all over the world. Of course, there are there is migration of people, but if you see take any single factor, for instance, more than 600,000 Syrian were accepted by some European countries. Why? Because 11 million Syrian were rendered homeless, and many of them risked their life fleeing here and there. In the same way, if some people are running from Iran today, again, in the past, Ayatollah Kashani and other fanatical elements were supported by the Western world, and the disciples of Ayatollah Kashani are ruling over Iran today. And of course, they are putting different restrictions on women. So it has to be seen in historical context. So one of the maybe steps that might be helpful in preventing migration is to stop wars. But unfortunately, Western manufacturing companies, arms manufacturing companies, and oil companies, they do want war, they do want conflict, but this is how they thrive. Look at Ukrainian conflict, and you can see the stocks of arms manufacturing companies and oil companies, because they thrive on conflict. Large arms manufacturing companies, or biggest manufacturing arm company in the world, where are they located? Where are their headquarters are located? They are the ones who supply weapons to all belligerent states. So if Tommy Robinson, Konstantin, and other people want to stop war, then of course go ahead. Stop war. If you want to stop immigration, stop wars and conflicts. At least Western countries could stop supplying weapons to the belligerent state. It will not cause more harm then. It will not affect more people then. How many people can you possibly kill without advanced weapons or modern weapons, right? So 11 million people were rendered homeless in Syria because of conflict. Millions of people were rendered homeless because of conflicts in Afghanistan, in Sudan, in Somalia, in Nigeria, and other parts of the world. So stop the war, and you can stop immigration to a great extent. Stop supplying weapons, and you can prevent regions from plunging into wars and civil wars. And when most of the people are not affected by war, they would not want to leave their country. Nobody wants to leave his or her country. So if migration has to be seen, it has to be seen in its context, and the real causes of migration should be probed. One should not issue a sweeping statement like Tommy Robinson in the past was accused that people who were fleeing the terrorism of Islamic State in Syria, they were fake refugees. No, many of them were not fake refugees. There could be some exceptions. If Robinson was really true, he should have visited Syria during that time when jihadists were beheading people, they were burning people alive. There was a reign of terror. And who was turning blind eye to these terrorist activities against the Western world? Why? Because for them, Bashar al Assad was their main target. So we shall continue um, other parts of the interview. We will discuss other questions or topics. But one point that I'll see, if you watch this interview, you will notice a great difference, especially Konstantin and Francis Foster conducted an interview with the guilty feminist, uh, host Deborah. And Konstantin heckled her with questions. She was unable to even answer at some places. But here, these two guys from immigrant backgrounds, they were sitting as, I'm sorry to say, as silent spectator. They were providing platform so that Tommy Robinson can peddle, his propaganda. They did not pose him tough questions. It's very clear. So I will put the interview of the guilty feminist host, and you could see and make your own judgment that there is a great difference. During that interview, uh, Constantine, he heckled her many times, would not let her explain. And here you have time, minutes after minutes. Maybe they might have given him hours if it was in their power to explain. So this is also one of the observations that I wanted to make. I shall continue in part three because there are more questions related to Tommy Robinson's interview at Triggernometry.